What if the reason humanity is constantly teetering on the brink of, World War III isn't actually about geopolitics or resource scarcity or political ideologies?
Right, all the usual
Yeah,
suspects.
exactly. What if the root cause of all our global anxiety and violence is actually our complete, utter ignorance of what happens behind closed doors? Welcome to today's deep dive. For you listening right now, our mission today is to unpack a highly provocative 1968 philosophical lecture. It's titled From Sex to Superconsciousness, and we're specifically looking at Chapter 4.
Yeah, and it's a heavy one.
It really is. This
Yeah.
material challenges absolutely everything you might think you know about human sexuality, linking it directly to, well, spiritual liberation, a state known as samadhi, and ultimately to the very survival of the human race.
And before we dive in, we really should make something very clear to the listener. This text makes some massive, sweeping condemnations of organized religion, asceticism, and basically all societal norms.
Oh yeah, it doesn't hold back.
Not at all. So we are here to impartially unpack the author's highly controversial philosophy. We aren't endorsing these viewpoints or the claims made about global mental health or religious figures, but we are going to explore the underlying logic of the arguments because, they offer radically different lens on human behavior.
Okay, let's unpack this. You probably assume you understand the basic biology of reproduction, right? We all do. But the core premise we are dealing with today is that humanity as a whole is entirely in the dark. Like, we are just sleepwalking through our most fundamental drive.
Completely sleepwalking.
And to illustrate why we are so oblivious, the author points to our stubborn refusal to simply admit when we don't know something. There is this brilliant, slightly absurd anecdote early in the text about a small village school in India teaching the ancient epic, the Ramayana.
A setting that perfectly captures the illusion of knowledge, honestly. In this village school, the teaching is completely devoid of life. Like, the teacher is literally dozing off while mechanically reciting these ancient verses, and the students are just asleep at their desks.
Right.
Then the school inspector unexpectedly walks in. Everyone snaps to attention in a panic, and the inspector decides to test the classroom with a basic question. He asks, who broke the bow of Shankara?
Now, anyone who knows Ramayana knows this is a mythological artifact from the story, right? But what happens next is just a masterclass in human self-deception. A student immediately stands up, incredibly defensive, and blurts out, "Excuse me, sir, but I didn't break it. I was away for 15 days, and I'm always blamed when things break around here."
Which is amazing. And then the teacher, trying to save his own skin, chimes in and tells the inspector, don't listen to his sweet talk. This rascal is definitely the culprit.
Just immediately throwing the kid under the bus.
Exactly. And the panic just spirals from there. The furious inspector goes to the headmaster, who begs him to drop the issue entirely, warning that, if they punish a student, the whole school will go on strike and burn the furniture.
Over a mythological bow.
Right. Finally, the inspector takes it all the way to the chairman of the school committee, and the chairman casually dismisses the whole thing, saying, don't bother finding the culprit. No matter who broke the bow, the committee will just pay to get it repaired.
It's hilarious, but the underlying point is devastating. No one in that entire chain of command actually knew the answer to the question. No one even thought to pause and ask, wait, which Shankara are we talking about?
Yeah, nobody wanted to look stupid.
Instead of admitting their ignorance, every single adult in the room doubled down to save face. And the philosophy we are exploring today connects this exact phenomenon directly to human sexuality. We assume that because we can marry and procreate, which animals do completely on instinct, we inherently understand what sex is. The author says, think about driving a car for 1,000 miles. Doing that doesn't mean the first thing about how the combustion engine actually works, or pressing a light switch doesn't make you an electrician. But let me push back on this framework for a second here.
Sure.
Is comparing a natural biological function that is literally baked into our DNA to complex mechanical engineering really a fair analogy? We don't need to understand digestion to digest food.
Well, biology gives us the instinct, yes.
Right.
But because the biological instinct works so automatically, the evolutionary on-off switch, the author argues we never bother to investigate the engine, we never study the deeper physiological and spiritual mechanisms at play.
So we're just ignoring the mechanics completely.
Yeah, right. We experience the localized physical act, but we completely miss what is actually happening to our consciousness during that act. Digestion doesn't have the capacity to radically alter our state of consciousness, but sex does. And because we just let the instinct run on autopilot, sex has rarely been studied scientifically or philosophically as a tool for profound psychological transformation.
Wow, okay. We are just blindly flipping the switch without understanding the electrical grid. And that brings us to the hidden mechanism we are supposedly missing. The author argues that just as discovering the physical atom utterly changed the modern world, for better or worse, discovering what he calls the atom of sex, will launch humanity into an entirely new era of wisdom.
Yeah, he uses that exact phrase, atom of sex.
And this isn't just abstract poetry either. The text lays out a very specific, literal timeline of how the duration of coitus impacts the human mind and the return of physical desire.
The underlying logic here relies on the idea of energetic release and satiation. The text claims that if the physical act is rushed and lasts only 1 minute, the fundamental psychological desire isn't actually met. It just temporarily exhausts the body, meaning desire returns the very next day.
Okay.
If the act can be prolonged for 3 minutes, desire is satiated for a week. Hit 7 minutes and you are free of the distraction of desire for 3 months.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text claims that if the period of coitus can be extended to 3 hours, a person will be free of sex forever. They will achieve a state of eternal bliss or samadhi. Now, wait, a 3-hour duration sounds like a practically impossible physical feat for a modern listener to wrap their head around. Are we talking about athletic endurance here?
Not at all. And interpreting it as athletic endurance is where modern readers completely misread the philosophy. The text frames this as a state of deep meditative surrender, not physical exertion.
Some meditative surrender.
Right. And it provides the actual mechanics for how this is achieved. The first technique is incredibly shallow, slow breathing. Slowing the breath isn't just a mental trick, it directly taps into the autonomic nervous system.
Like biohacking almost.
Exactly. By consciously slowing the breath, you shift the body out of the sympathetic nervous system, the whole fight or flight mammalian rush that drives instinctual friction, and into the parasympathetic nervous system. This cools down the biological urgency, naturally prolonging the act and opening the mind to deeper realizations.
So you are essentially hacking the body's biological clock by removing the panic of the climax.
Precisely. And the second technique is focusing one's awareness entirely on the Agni Chakra, the midpoint between the eyes on the forehead. The mechanism here is about shifting neural activity.
Okay, so away from the physical act.
Yeah, instead of allowing your consciousness to be entirely localized in the lower instinctual centers of the body, you are pulling your absolute attention up to the higher cognitive and spiritual centers. You are creating a sort of localized sensory deprivation for the rest of the body.
That is wild.
When you combine the slowed nervous system with this intense focal point, the text argues you slip into samadhi. The magnetic pull you feel transforms from a drive for physical intercourse into an attraction to pure spiritual brilliance.
So you are using the intense energy of the physical act as rocket fuel, basically. But you are steering it away from a biological release and toward a massive expansion of consciousness.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
The physical friction almost becomes secondary to dwelling in a state of suspended, unified awareness. This creates one of the most fascinating paradoxes in the entire lecture. Having just detailed a 3-hour sexual technique to become free of sex forever, the author then tackles the concept of celibacy. But it is a radically different definition than what most religions teach, because profound physical intimacy is positioned as the absolute prerequisite for it.
Right. True celibacy, referred to in the text as brahmacharya, cannot be forced or imposed through willpower or, moral superiority. The text describes true celibacy as the cream of a profoundly realized sexual experience.
Like the byproduct of it.
Yes, exactly. It's the natural byproduct of having explored the depths of intimacy so completely that the mystery and the desperate biological pull just dissolve. The author even suggests this complete satiation might have occurred in a past life for certain naturally celibate individual.
The text is incredibly harsh on those who try to force celibacy without that foundational experience. It claims that forced self-styled celibacy just creates neurotics.
Yeah, it really doesn't mince words.
Think of the analogy used here. Forcing yourself to be celibate is like locking yourself in a dingy, foul-smelling, pitch-black room, squeezing your eyes tightly shut, and trying to convince yourself the outside world doesn't exist.
Which sounds miserable.
Right. True transcendence is getting up, opening the window, and actually looking at the bright sun, the moon, and the birds in the sky. It is the undeniable knowledge of that vast reality that ultimately inspires you to willingly walk out of the dirty room.
And the psychology behind this is vital. Why are we so driven towards sex in the first place? The text argues it's a desperate yearning for original unity. Compare it to an infant who has just been uprooted from the total nourishment and boundaryless oneness of the mother's womb.
We just want to get back there.
Exactly. We spend our lives yearning to return to that state. Sex is the adult attempt to re-experience that original unity, to dissolve the ego and merge completely with another.
But human love has a tragic limitation. Because we are finite beings, our physical unions are inherently temporary. Like, we manage to merge for a fleeting moment, but biology dictates that we have to separate again.
We can't stay merged forever.
No. And this forced separation leads to a deep postcoital despair. There is a sudden sense of alienation and often an inexplicable irritation between lovers. Unconsciously, you start to blame the other person because they seem to be the cause of that sudden crushing feeling of dejection and isolation. The text brings up a beautiful comparison of a candle versus the sun. If finite human union is just a flickering candle and eternal fusion with existence is the blazing sun, does this mean the text views all normal romantic relationships as doomed to despair, since a candle can never really compare to the sun?
What's fascinating here is that the author insists on the exact opposite of condemnation. You cannot hate the candle. We must understand, revere, and respect the dim light of that candle first.
Which is start somewhere.
Right. If you want to comprehend the blinding infinity of the sun, you can't start by cursing the only light you currently have in the dark. The physical act of sex, finite human love with all its limitations, is the essential first rung on the ladder. The text warns that those who censure the physical act or refuse to take that first step with total meditative awareness will never be able to reach the ultimate goal of samadhi. You have to pass entirely through the finite to understand the infinite.
So what does this all mean? We've been exploring deeply personal, individual enlightenment. But the source material dramatically expands the scope here, arguing that this isn't just about personal spiritual growth. Our collective ignorance of how to navigate sex is positioned as the root cause of humanity's survival or distraction. It all comes down to the spiritual mechanics of conception.
Yes, the macro level. The text introduces the idea that conception isn't just a biological merging of cells, it's a magnetic, spiritual event. The specific emotional state and circumstances at the exact moment of climax dictate the frequency or, the type of soul that is drawn into the new life. It relies on the esoteric concept of resonance.
Meaning like attracts like. If an infant is conceived while the parents are in a state of anger, guilt, anxiety, or just mindless animalistic friction, their combined energetic field resonates at a very low frequency. The author claims this magnetizes a consciousness that matches that trauma, meaning the child is fundamentally afflicted from birth.
Which is a heavy thought.
Really heavy. But on the flip side, if sex is approached cheerfully, purely, and prayerfully, if the parents are touching that state of samadhi, we talked about the text claims we can sire superior souls. This aligns with what philosophers like Aurobindo and Nietzsche referred to as supermen.
And this hidden mechanism of conception explains why, according to the author, all past religious and moral leaders have ultimately failed to change the world.
Yeah, the text names massive figures. Buddha, Mahavir, Christ, Gandhi. They all preached love, compassion, and nonviolence, yet they completely failed to stop war and cruelty. Why? Because mankind carries a germ of frustration from the very moment of conception. If our baseline souls are diseased and traumatized before anyone even tries to teach us morality, then sermons on peace are just band-aids on a gaping wound.
To support this sense of impending existential doom, the text cites the staggering violence of the 20th century. 30 million dead in World War I, 75 million in World War II. It quotes Einstein's chilling realization that while he didn't know what weapons would be used in World War III, World War IV would be fought with sticks and stones.
That quote always gives me chills.
It does. Or, as the author frames it, there will simply be no World War IV because no one will survive the third.
And the lecture even brings in psychiatry to underscore the point, citing a statistic that only 18% of New York City's population at the time was deemed mentally normal. From that, the author predicts the whole world will soon become one enormous madhouse. This is an incredibly intense perspective for you, the listener, to process, blaming our sexual ignorance for the impending apocalypse rather than blaming corrupt politicians, economic collapse, or basic human greed.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can synthesize the core architecture of the argument. Society treats sex either as an obscene, shameful taboo or a mechanical, biological function. As long as sex remains a mechanical nightmare rather than a sacred meditative act, the emotional and spiritual baseline of every new generation is fundamentally compromised from the moment of conception.
Wow.
The author is arguing a point of stark determinism. You simply cannot build a peaceful, enlightened society out of individuals who are conceived in moments of unconscious friction or deep-seated psychological guilt. Until the root is healed, the consciousness of humanity will continue to sink into an abyss, regardless of our technological progress.
If this sacred knowledge of the atom of sex is truly the key to preventing a global madhouse who has been hiding it from us, the text identifies a highly controversial culprit, pointing the finger squarely at those who are traditionally considered saintly and ascetic. The religious authorities and priests who suppress and condemn sex are blamed as the architects of our misery.
Yeah, the author views these ascetic figures as the ultimate advertising agents for obscenity, pornography, and perversion.
By suppressing sex and branding it a sin, they turn a natural function into a dangerous, irresistible, and mysterious obsession. It's the classic psychological trap. The moment you declare something absolutely forbidden, it completely dominates the human mind. To illustrate this, the author shares a dark, brilliant little parable about a priest and Satan. A priest is rushing across a field to his church to deliver a sermon on the topic of love is God. On his way, he sees a man bleeding in a ditch with a knife in his chest.
And the priest's immediate thought is that he cannot stop to help because he will be late to deliver his sermon on love. The hypocrisy is immediate.
Exactly. But the dying man calls out and says, "If I survive this, I'm going to tell everyone in town that you left a man to die in a ditch just so you could go preach about love." Fearing the terrible PR, the priest approaches, only to realize the bleeding man is Satan himself.
A huge twist.
Upon recognizing the devil, the priest vehemently refuses to touch him, declaring it a profound sin to help the embodiment of evil.
No.
But Satan just laughs at him and he says, "Listen, if I die right now, all the priests and ministers will be out of work tomorrow. You are who you are because I am alive. I am the entire basis of your profession."
This raises an important question about the nature of enforced morality and the systems built around it. The moment Satan points out their symbiotic relationship, the priest picks him up, puts him on his shoulders, and rushes him to the hospital, practically begging the devil not to die so the clergy can keep their jobs.
The irony is staggering. Can you break down this symbiotic relationship the author sees between religious suppression and societal perversion?
Well, the text asserts that mankind is a slave to sex, precisely because of this enforced ignorance and the industry built around saving us from it. Religious authorities, according to this philosophy, need the sin of sex to exist so they can permanently position themselves as the saviors who provide the cure.
They need a problem to sell the solution.
Exactly. By constantly slandering sex, making it taboo and shameful, they ensure that human beings remain fixated on it in a lustful, unhealthy way. The priest needs Satan alive to stay in business. The ascetic needs sex to remain a dirty, dangerous secret, so their teachings of suppression continue to hold power over the masses. The industry of salvation requires a perpetual crisis of sin.
It is a profound systemic critique.
Well,
According to the text, understanding and ultimately transcending our sexual nature is far more critical to the future survival of humanity than going to the moon, exploring the deep ocean, or splitting the physical atom. It demands a complete paradigm shift. We have to accept sex, know it fully, and experience it deeply with total meditative awareness in order to ever move beyond it.
moving from a framework of shame and mechanics to one of deep reverence and conscious meditation.
Which brings us to the end of our exploration today. But before you go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on this philosophy's central paradox of celibacy. The author claims that true freedom from a physical desire can only be achieved by passing deeply through it with total awareness, rather than avoiding or suppressing it. Think about the modern world you navigate every day. Could this same principle apply to our modern addictions?
That's an interesting parallel.
Whether it's our compulsive attachment to our phones, our obsession with work, our desperate need for social validation, or just endless consumption. Could our most intense, frustrating earthly obsessions actually be the exact portals we are meant to meditate on and pass straight through? What if the only way to achieve total freedom from the things that control us is to stop running away from them, and instead finally turn around and observe them with absolute terrifying clarity?
It's a lens that challenges the very foundation of how we treat every compulsion in our lives today.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. As you go about your week, we encourage you to keep questioning the basic on-off switches you rely on, because as we've seen today, sometimes the most mechanical, ordinary switch is actually wired to something infinite. Catch you next time.